Again, if you're following on YouTube, welcome to the stream. Today we're going to simply do a very short guide on how to settle in multiplayer and some decisions you have to take into consideration before you start the game. As some of you may know, the settling your city is probably one of the most important decisions you can take in your game for Civilization 6. So we're going to do a few quick guide on how to settle and a few tips and tricks. As usual, we're going to just start a game here and get it started to give you a little bit feel of how a multiplayer player might be thinking.
Stirrings of life beneath water, to the great beasts of the Stone Age, to man taking his first upright steps, you have come far. Now begins your greatest quest, from this early cradle of civilization on towards the stars. Your people look to you, Emperor Pedro II, to lead Brazil onto the world stage. Use your reputation as a patron of artists, scientists, and engineers.
I did cut up the text short pretty there. I'm sorry about that if you like to hear Sean's voice here, but we're in, and we've got the road Brazil by chance here. So in any multiplayer game, in any single player game, you will always have this setup to start with. You always have a warrior and a settler. So the same thing is in single player. And the same ratios and same principles as single player apply. So if you do have a lot of single player experience, you might have a little bit of this knowledge already. However, in multiplayer, there's an extra layer to think about, because since you're playing against other players, they might be thinking as well on how to possibly kill you, right? Because in some cases, some senses, players can be very rough and do try to take advantage of everything they can get. And if we come in a multiplayer game with a single player mindset, sometimes you realize that you don't make enough army to defend yourself, and that sometimes you do prioritize some decisions which are very strong in single player but might not be as strong in multiplayer. So it is very, very important to keep this in mind when you get into a multiplayer game. So I'm actually pretty happy with this start here, because I'll be able to describe many of the things that are very, very important. So first, before you settle any city, you do want to get as much information as you want. This is the same in single player. So just by looking at the side, you say, okay, in which direction do I need to get more information in order for me to get the best settle possible? So personally, I would have been tempted to go north, because I think I already have enough information to know where I'm settling at the moment. And going north allows me to possibly find a city-state first and get an envoy first, and maybe get some huts. But in theory, if you want to get as much information as possible, going here might not have been the best choice. Maybe going here might be more optimal to see if there's anything here, or even going down in that direction, either here or here, to discover what's south to ensure this is a good and prime location spot, right? So we have Brazil. Obviously, you have civilizations that have bonuses depending on their start bias. We have a whole list. If you want to join us, I'll put maybe a link below to the actually start bias of every civilization that we know of at the moment. And besides the start bias, some civilizations have bonuses towards, like, for example, Dutch next to rivers, or Brazil have bonuses with jungles, for example. So we do want to keep that in mind when we settle our first city. But regardless of those bonuses, see, we do have a very, very strong start with Brazil. And I do think my first impression would have been to probably move out on the cows right here to gain an extra fruit from the get-go. However, there's many decisions that could be debated here, which are pretty strong. So since my first instinct would be to move to the cow, I would like to know more information about north side to see if it's really worth it. Or if I want to consider about moving on the hill here, which is also a good settle spot, you would probably want to go south. So I personally would have you could also settle the luxury on the cocoa here, which is a very, very strong choice, and you get also an extra production. So this is all very strong starts. I think the best scouting position for the warrior would be to go south to ensure that we might have some more resources that might be valuable in that direction. So this is what we're going to do first. obviously, I do want to point out that you do want to settle on freshwater. So here we have all those tiles are freshwater. So all those tiles are already much better than the other tiles, especially for the very first city. Your capital gets an extra housing for the palace, but you do want to get as many houses as possible, because you will see that often the housing cap is more of a problem than a solution. You'll be able to often get enough food to reach that cap, regardless of your capital or regardless of your location. Well, there's a few exceptions, but generally food is not an issue. Generally housing is the issue. So you do want to stay on the river here. So here we do have I'm actually pretty happy I scouted south. We got a huge amount of information here, and since the river ends here, you do have to keep in mind that if you settle south, you might unlock another spot on that river on that direction here. So let's say if I was settling, for example, on the cocoa or on the hill right here, then I might be able to unlock a spot on that side of the river, knowing that there is 3 tile distance minimum between cities. So for example, let's say I would not move, I could settle here. That means that like 1, 2, 3, the next tile I could potentially settle would be this one here, which we haven't discovered, to be minimal distance. But let's say I move down on the cocoa, I could potentially settle here as well. This is important in multiplayer because often you actually are limited in space. You'll have to plan your cities properly, and unless you have a very good location to go for very tall cities where you can afford to get a bigger distance in between cities, often you end up having a minimal distance city settles all around the capital. It also saves you time, because since we play on online speed, all the time you take to walk is time that your settler is not actually producing anything for your empire. So you do want to try to optimize that in that sense as well. So this being said, we don't know where the other opponents are from the beginning, and it's obviously very hard to judge where they potentially will be. Although with Brazil, they tend to spawn with rainforests, so they tend to spawn surrounded by players, because rainforests tend to spawn in the middle of the map. So we could expect someone in every direction if we were to play Brazil as an example. So here, just because we scouted south and I saw that there's actually some tiles that could potentially be improved, and we still have a lot of decent shops around, we could argue that settling here would be good on the cocoa. So for example, if we settle the cocoa here, we will lose the jungle, but we will have a standard 2 food as usual in our city, because any city settled in any tile always gets 2 food. You also get a production regardless of where you settle. So if I was to settle here, I would actually gain 1 production on that tile, so my city would have 2 food and 1 production. However, if I was to settle here, I do lose the jungle, but it is a plains hill. So I'm gonna like hover the tile, you'll be able to see that. So it's a plains hill, that's the first line. That means that if I settle on that hill, you will actually get an extra production. A plains hill is 1 food, 2 production. So by settling on it, I up my production to 2. My capital would be the 2 food and 2 production. If I settle on a grassland hill right here, I would only get 1 production, because the hill itself is not providing more than 1 production. And if I settle on the hill right here, the hill would provide an extra production. And I do not lose the hill by settling there. And the other advantage of settling the cocoa is we actually get a 3 gold from the get-go. So, and we do have the luxury, as soon as we research irrigation, we would have the amenity from the luxury as well. So it's going to be a very, very strong start if we settle, for example, on the tile right here. So we'd have a capital that, without any tiles work, would already do 2 food, 2 production, and 3 gold. We do lose this year. If we were to go here, for example, it would be the same principle. We would lose the forest. So a plains hill without the forest is a 1 food, 2 production tile. And if we settle on it, it become two food city and two production city, because the city always has two food bases, whatever tile you settle on. So if you were to move here, it would be a two food capital and two production. So, and if you're like, for example, if you move on the cattle here, you could have a three food capital and one production on the tile. So if we were to sell the cattle, we would get extra food and grow the city even quicker. So this would be very, very interesting. It's a very, very strong start, honestly, especially for Brazil. And I think the best location for the city would actually be on the cocoa. So let's go settle on it right now. We'll do it next turn. And you have to remember that, yes, you do lose a turn. So you have one turn where you do not produce any science or culture. But those extra yields will actually help a lot pay off this one turn lost. And most of the time, it's worth it for the first city to settle in the first 2 or 3 turns. And the quickest you settle, you get more yields. But you really have to get the prime location for your first city. So let's settle on it right now. As you can see, we have 2 food, 2 production, 3 gold. But we lost the jungle. So, but this is just it is normal. If you settle on any forest or jungle, you do lose them. You do not lose cattle, you don't lose stones, you don't lose luxury resources, but anything that is a bonus resources, you might lose it. So, the other advantage of settling here is, for multiplayer purpose, you do have rivers and some good tiles to defend your city. You have to remember that someone might try to kill you at one point in the game. So having those hills, having this river, gives some bonuses as well to potentially defend your city. And I highly recommend you start by playing defensive in your first few games to get the hang of it. So this location here, especially with the mountain, allows you to even potentially get an encampment, create a choke point here. Like if you win an encampment there, you have only one tile to pass. Or you can try to potentially get an encampment as well on the south shore to get a much harder time for the enemy to pass through. To probably potentially put the encampment there and station units all around here to have the river bonuses as defense. So this is a very, very good settling location for the beginning. That's it. So this applies for the first city. It applies for any city really. As it goes to the game, you do want to get as much yields as possible. You do want to try to plan your future cities. So for example, we plan, because we settled here, we could potentially settle there if you want. So we opened one extra option on the river, which is very strong. And you do want to also try to settle the land that you can defend. So if you're close to enemies, you want to settle towards them and defend it. Or if you feel you would not be able to defend it, then you have to settle away from them and be able to defend your own city and set up your border. So very, very interesting start. Thank you for watching. Thank you for enjoying this stream. And I guess I'll see you guys next time. This completes the how to settle in multiplayer. Ciao.